The hotel room with no goodbyes. Inside Menglong'S final night alone. The night was ordinary to everyone else, but to Menglong, it was the end of everything. The city outside his hotel window pulsed with life, neon lights, laughter, the distant hum of cars speeding through wet streets. But inside room 1108, time had frozen. It was quiet, painfully quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't just fill the room but crawls under the skin and stays there. No one knew that the man who smiled through screens, who lit up stages and red carpets, was spending his final hours in that lonely space. No one knew that behind those walls, Menglong, beloved actor, singer, and heartthrob, was crumbling under a weight no one could see. The cameras had stopped rolling, but his pain hadn't. He had checked into the hotel under his name, like any other weary traveler returning from a long day of work. The receptionist remembered his gentle smile, the same smile millions adored online. He looked tired, yes, but not broken. He carried only a small suitcase and a phone that buzzed endlessly in his pocket. Yet, by the time the clock struck midnight, those same buzzing notifications would fade into the stillness of unread messages. The hotel room was simple: white sheets, a mahogany desk, a small balcony overlooking the city. The kind of place meant for rest. But Menglong didn't rest that night. He sat by the window, staring at the city lights like they were ghosts of memories he could no longer touch. The glow from the street below danced across his face, highlighting the exhaustion etched deep into his eyes. He had spent years perfecting the art of pretending. Every fan meeting, every interview, every show had become another stage where he wore the same mask, a smile bright enough to hide the storm beneath. He laughed easily, spoke softly, and always deflected when people asked how he was doing. "I'm fine," he would say. The phrase became a shield, a script he repeated until even he started to believe it. But that night, in that lonely room, there was no one left to convince. His phone lit up with names that once brought him joy. Friends, colleagues, messages filled with congratulations, requests, reminders. He scrolled through them with a hollow expression. The calls he wished for never came. The ones that would have said, "How are you, really?" Or, "Do you need someone tonight?" None of those arrived. The world kept spinning, too fast and too bright for someone fading quietly in the shadows. On the bedside table lay a half-written note. It wasn't dramatic, no cries for help or grand farewells. Just a few sentences, soft, almost apologetic. "I tried my best," it read. "I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger." The words were small, like whispers trapped between breaths. He poured himself a glass of water, then another. He sat on the edge of the bed, his fingers tracing invisible patterns across the blanket. His mind wandered to his first acting role, to the fans who waited outside sets for hours just to catch a glimpse, to the songs he once sang with passion that now felt distant. He had lived for others for so long that he'd forgotten how to live for himself. Somewhere around 2 a.m., the rain began to fall. Gentle at first, then heavier, pressing against the glass like the sky itself was mourning. He watched the raindrops race down the window pane, each one reflecting the dim light of the street lamp below. He reached out as if to touch them, but his fingers only met the cold glass. That invisible barrier, the same one between him and the world, felt thicker than ever. There were moments that night when he almost picked up his phone, almost called someone, almost sent a message, but almost became his last companion. The fear of burdening others, the guilt of his own sadness, it silenced him. It always had. By 3 a.m., the city began to sleep. The laughter faded, the streets emptied. The only sounds left were the rhythmic hum of the air conditioner and the quiet tap of rain. He stood one last time, walked to the mirror, and looked at the reflection staring back. For the first time in years, he didn't fix his hair or straighten his collar. He didn't force a smile. He simply looked. That reflection wasn't the celebrity everyone adored. It was just a man, tired and lost, searching for peace in a world that demanded too much of him. He whispered something to his reflection, something too faint for anyone to ever hear. Then he turned away. When morning came, the city was alive again. The sun rose without hesitation, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. People hurried to work, taxis honked, life went on. But in room 1108, the world had stopped. The phone kept ringing, the messages kept coming. The receptionist knocked softly at first, then louder before calling for help. Inside, the room looked untouched, except for the quiet stillness that filled it. The bed was neatly made, the curtains half drawn, the unfinished note on the table fluttering slightly in the morning breeze. His phone, still glowing faintly, showed missed calls from names that would soon cry when they found out they were too late. The news spread within hours. Fans couldn't believe it. Colleagues were speechless. The internet flooded with disbelief, sorrow, and questions that had no answers. Why became the most repeated word of the day. But no headline, no report, no official statement could capture what truly happened that night. The quiet unraveling of a man who gave everything until he had nothing left to give. Those who knew him closely spoke of his kindness, his calm spirit, his quiet strength. They said he never complained, even when exhaustion lined his every word. He always said he was okay. Always. But okay had been his way of saying he was drowning slowly. The hotel staff later recalled how polite he was when checking in, how he smiled as he thanked them for their help. They didn't know that it was the last smile he would ever give. They didn't know that behind those kind eyes was a man already saying goodbye to the world. His fans still visit that hotel. Some leave flowers at the front desk. Some sit quietly by the lobby window, staring at the elevator that carried him up for the last time. Others light candles outside and whisper, "You're not alone anymore." And maybe, in some invisible way, he hears them. Maybe his spirit lingers, not in the sorrow of that night, but in the laughter he once gave to the world. The songs, the roles, the small moments that touched people's hearts, they remain. But the truth is, that hotel room will forever hold the silence he left behind. It will always echo with the memory of what could have been said, the calls that should have been answered, the goodbyes that never came. Menglong's final night wasn't about fame or failure. It was about a heart too gentle for a world too loud. It was about how someone so loved could still feel unseen. About how the brightest smiles can hide the deepest wounds. The hours before dawn carried a strange stillness, a haunting calm that felt almost deliberate, as if the world itself paused to listen to his silence. Inside room 1108, the air had grown colder, heavy with unspoken words. The rain outside had stopped, leaving behind the faint scent of wet earth and city dust. It was the kind of scent that reminded people of endings, of something washed away but not forgotten. Menglong sat on the carpet, his back against the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The dim light above flickered once, twice, then steadied, illuminating the faint trace of exhaustion beneath his eyes. He had been up all night, too restless to sleep, too lost to find peace. On the desk beside him lay an untouched meal from room service, cold now, forgotten, like so many things in his life that no longer mattered. He reached for his phone again. There were messages, hundreds of them, notifications from fans, producers, his team, but not the one he needed most. No one said, "I'm worried about you." No one asked, "Are you alone?" They all wanted something, an answer, a confirmation, a promise to show up tomorrow. And Menglong, ever the professional, had always been the one to show up. But tomorrow there would be no stage, no call sheet, no cameras. He scrolled through his photos instead, moments captured in time. Smiles that looked genuine, laughter frozen mid-motion. There was one picture that lingered on his screen longer than the rest. A photo of him from years ago, holding a guitar, eyes bright, hopeful. Back then he believed in forever, in dreams, in love. He believed that the world would understand him if he just worked hard enough. But as fame grew, understanding faded. The pressure became louder than his thoughts, and the expectations drowned out his quiet cries for rest. Everyone loved Menglong, but few truly knew him. They adored the idea of him, the charming actor, the perfect son, the idol who could do no wrong. But the man behind the name had grown invisible, lost beneath layers of performance and politeness. He stood and walked to the mirror again. This time, he touched the cold glass, tracing the reflection of his face with a trembling hand. "Who are you now?" he whispered, voice breaking under its own weight. The man, staring back, had eyes that no longer sparkled. They were tired, dimmed by years of pretending that everything was fine. A knock came from the hallway. Housekeeping. "Room service, sir?" He didn't respond. The voice faded, footsteps moved away, and silence reclaimed the space. He sank back onto the bed and let out a shaky sigh. For years, that room would become a ghost story among hotel staff, how one of China's brightest stars spent his final night alone. They would say the air felt different in there, that sometimes late at night, guests would hear faint humming, like someone singing softly to himself. That night, Menglong did hum, a song he once loved, something from his early days before fame, before the spotlight. His voice was fragile, breaking at the edges, barely more than a whisper. Yet it filled the room with a kind of melancholy beauty, a goodbye hidden in melody. His notebook lay open beside him, pages filled with fragments of thoughts, unfinished lyrics, lines from scripts, ideas for new roles. There was one sentence circled in red ink. "Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest storms." Maybe he wrote it for himself. Maybe it was the only truth he could still hold on to. At around 4 a.m., he opened the balcony door. The wind brushed through the curtains, cool and soft against his skin. The city below glowed like a constellation, each light representing a life that would continue after his ended. He leaned against the railing, eyes glistening as he watched the world that once felt too big for him, now somehow too far away. He thought about the people he loved, the ones who'd once held him close, the ones who drifted away. He thought about promises he couldn't keep and apologies he never said. He thought about the young boy who dreamed of being seen and the man who now wished for invisibility. Somewhere between those thoughts, he made peace with his decision. It wasn't a moment of madness. It was a slow surrender, born from years of silence and the exhaustion of wearing a smile that no longer belonged to him. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, he was gone. The city outside awakened to another day, unaware that a beautiful soul had slipped quietly into eternity just a few floors above. Hours later, when the knock at his door went unanswered, panic replaced politeness. The staff opened the door and the stillness hit them first, a kind of silence that feels alive, heavy, unforgettable. His body was still, serene, almost peaceful. The note on the table was found beside a small candle that had burned itself out. The words were simple. "Please forgive me. Thank you for everything." In the days that followed, the hotel room became a shrine. Fans left flowers, photos, handwritten letters. The hallway outside filled with soft sobs and candlelight. Reporters crowded the entrance, desperate for a story, but none could capture the truth of that night. Because the truth wasn't in the tragedy, it was in the tenderness. The quiet moments of a man who gave too much of himself to a world that only wanted his perfection, not his pain. It was in the way he tried to smile, even as he unraveled. It was in the silence he kept, hoping someone might hear what he couldn't say out loud. Menglong's story became more than a news headline. It became a mirror reflecting the quiet suffering so many hide behind laughter and success. People began to talk about mental health, about loneliness, about how sometimes the brightest faces belong to those fighting the darkest battles. His death wasn't just a loss, it was a wake-up call. Even now, fans say they can't listen to his songs the same way anymore. Every lyric feels heavier, every melody tinged with farewell. His voice carries the ache of a man who loved the world too deeply, even when it didn't love him back enough to notice he was slipping away. Room 1108 was eventually closed to guests. The hotel claimed it was under renovation, but those who worked there knew better. They said the room didn't feel the same anymore, that the air carried a quiet sadness, as if it remembered him. And perhaps it does. Perhaps that room still holds his final whispers, the echo of his humming, the weight of his loneliness. Perhaps it remains a sacred space, a place where the world's noise fades and one man's truth still lingers softly in the air. For those who still miss him, his memory has become a kind of promise to listen, to reach out, to see the unseen, to never let another soul fade in silence the way you Menglong did. Because somewhere between the laughter he gave and the tears he hid, he left behind a lesson written not in ink, but in heartbreak. The ones who smile the brightest are often the ones silently breaking. And sometimes the kindest souls leave without goodbyes, hoping the world will finally understand what they could never say. In that quiet hotel room, the curtains swayed gently with the morning breeze, the city hummed back to life, and you Menglong, finally free from the weight of pretending, rested in eternal peace.